successful after those 5 years. And so that's what we call the monitoring phase. And we're not actively working on anything in the community, but rather just making sure that everything is going smoothly. Here is a map of some of the communities that we've worked in and the projects we've worked on. We've been around since 2006, so we've had a fair share of projects. Guatemala, we've been working in since our inception in 2006, and then Ethiopia is our other current project, and we are wrapping up a 3-year project and in Ethiopia that was formerly the Uganda project. And so those, Guatemala and then Ethiopia, Uganda, are the 2 big projects that we've sustained for many years now. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Ben, who's going to, oh, sorry. Sorry, one more thing. We also have a few local projects that we've been working on, starting with Lincoln International High School. Last school year, we reached out to them, and our Guatemala program was in one of those assessment years where we didn't have a lot of design work. And so we picked up this additional local project that would allow us to do a little bit more of the design work and allow our students to use those skills. And so that was really successful, and we're actually going to tell you a little bit more about it here in a minute. But then that led to the Ethiopia program this year using a similar model. While their Falakid Gerigera project is not having as much design work, they're using that extra time that they have and manpower that they have to complete a project with UFGA. And then finally, we have a third project team that's brand new this summer that is working on Lake Street rebuilding efforts. And that was in direct response to the George Floyd incidents and the ensuing riots earlier in the summer. And so we've teamed up with the Minnesota Professional Chapter, and we've just been reaching out to local community-based organizations to see how we can offer our support in these times. And so now I will turn it over to Ben to tell you a little bit more about our Guatemala project.
Thanks, Jacob. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Kroll. As Craig said, I am a sophomore in environmental geoscience and one of the project leads for our Guatemala project here at the U. Next slide. So to start off with a little bit more background on our community partner this year, we are working in a community called Chirihuyu, which is in the municipality of Comalapa, where we have been working for over 10 years. We first made contact with Chirihuyu in 2019 during our implementation phase of a previous project in Parashah. And at 250 people, it's relatively small compared to some of our previous projects. Their current access to water is hand-dug wells, and they face challenges due to their cultural and geographical isolation. So what that means culturally is they speak Spanish instead of Kachikal, which is the native language that most people in Comalapa speak. And geographically, they're far from the municipality center, so it's a little bit harder for them to get resources from the local government. The primary occupation of people in Chirihuyu is agriculture. So after identifying our community partner, we transitioned into planning for a community assessment trip to gather technical data and to better understand the community need. When COVID-19 canceled our in-country assessment trip, we transitioned to a remote model. And a key feature of assessment is talking to the community to understand what their needs are and how they would like to see them addressed. As Jacob was mentioning before, it's important that our project fits with the community lifestyle. Otherwise, it's an ineffective solution to a problem they might not have. The photo on the right shows teachers from our in-country contact and NGO Long Way Home, who helped us to remotely complete our demographic survey using Google Forms. You can see that they're all geared up in PPE to visit Chirihuyu, and some of the information that came out of that survey is shown on the left. Furthermore, we gathered topographic data, water quality information, and evaluations of the spring site that will be the source of water for our project. All this work was completed with the help of Long Way Home, who has been a fantastic partner as an NGO. Our proposed solution to their identified need of consistent potable water is a spring-fed water distribution system that also involves separating contaminated runoff water from the clean spring water, which is shown in the center photo there. And to familiarize you a little more with the spring site, the video shown here is an example of photogrammetry. Um, is it okay? Cool. Photogrammetry, in the simplest terms, is the process of stitching together hundreds of photos by aligning the pixels and then creating a 3D model, which is really awesome. So in this video, you can see bricks and shovels that were dimensioned for us. So we can actually use those as references and then make this 3D model to scale. This model was created by our Long Way Home contact, who went to the community and took 300 pictures of the spring site and then uploaded them to Google Photos, and then we could process them on this side of the world to create the model. Photogrammetry has technical applications for design by going beyond what photos can do, adding dimension to the space, and then creating somewhat of a virtual tour of our site for everyone who hasn't seen the community. So in terms of our implementation plans and our design solution to their problem, our plans are broken down into different components of the system, which is also how we divide our project team into subgroups. The spring collection team works on capturing the water, temporarily storing it in a small tank, and then pumping it uphill to the distribution tank, which is at a local maximum elevation to distribute the water to the entire community with gravity. Water sanitation is also completed at the distribution tank. Then the water leaving the tank is brought to all parts of the community through pipelines, which of course must be appropriate for the calculated flow rates and pressures based on topographic data. Otherwise, we'll have pipelines bursting and tap stands that don't have the right pressure. The final exit point of the water is the tap stands, of which there will be about 50 in Chirihuyu. These tap stands may vary in design from house to house to best meet the needs of the family living there. Finally, implementation wraps up with sustainability training, wherein community members are made familiar with maintenance practices to take care of the system after we leave. The photos on the left show some of our alternatives from our alternatives analysis, and then the photo on the right shows a water education session from our previous project in Paris Shaw. With everything going on, we've learned to hope for the best and plan for the worst. So that involves a lot of contingency planning. Although travel is unlikely this spring, we are sticking to our goal of project implementation by the end of the summer. This is a table of our contingency plans, and we are currently on plan A, which is prepping for May travel. And then if by February 15th, May travel is not feasible, we will immediately shift to simultaneously planning for remote implementation and August travel. The project has been broken down into different components, and involved parties will be responsible for different parts of the system. The bottom few rows of this contingency planning document are for the new community search. So in parallel with design and implementation of our Chirihuyu project, we are already looking ahead to our next community partner for assessment in summer 2021 and implementation in 2022. Something else that is new this year is our partnership with Rotary, which is super exciting. Rotary is an international service organization with a mission and values that line up very closely with EWB, and they have the ability to help us fund projects through their grants. So with the help of Marcus Thomas from Burnsville Rotary, our grant application was accepted and all material costs of our project were covered, which was super exciting. That just happened a few weeks ago. Marcus also recruited the efforts of Apple Valley Rotary Club and the Buffalo Rotary Club to fund the grant for our Chirihuyu project. Looking forward from this year, we plan to increase our involvement across the municipality of Comalapa by leveraging Rotary's support. In order to better track, maintain, and find future projects within Comalapa, we will be working with the municipality to create a diagnostic of their existing systems and community needs. This work is linked to our future community subgroup, which is currently targeting potential partnerships for a 2022 implementation year, and they're going to be making a decision for a new community partner by the end of the month. So we're really excited for that. All right, so that was Guatemala and Chirihuyu. Transitioning into our local project, I'd like to start off with some background information. This local project and the others that you will hear about today are all completed through Community Engineering Corps, which is a branch of EWB that manages domestic projects. So with our Lincoln International High School project, We partnered with a local high school to develop aquaponics modules for their classrooms. LIHS has a very diverse student population, with the majority of their student body composed of recent immigrants and refugees. Their school is located in the 3rd Precinct, but was not affected by the protests that took place there over the summer. Much like the University of Minnesota, LIHS has transitioned to online learning due to COVID-19, which has proven challenging given the language barriers and limited access to technology that many of their students face. So as Jacob was saying, last year our team completed design work. So we don't need a whole project team to continue the updates that we're currently working on. So instead, we've created a task force of 6 highly motivated students to work on the finalization and delivery of the system. Since last spring, we have had 1 prototype, shown in this photo here, operating in our civil engineering building, and we've taken the extra time that COVID has granted to do some fine-tuning and general improvements to our original design. The structure is one of the biggest and most complicated components of the system, and we plan to complete construction of 2 more modules over winter break, so that the wood structure is ready to go for the addition of fish and plants whenever LIHS gives us the green light to, and when they're returning to in-person classes. That is it for our Guatemala project. Now I would like to pass it off to Colin to talk about our work in Ethiopia. Colin?
Oh, and it looks like you're muted.
He's currently trying to find the unmute button.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jacob, I think I'm unable to control your screen now. Can you go back to the title slide? Oh, here we go. All right, sorry guys. The mute button somehow disappeared from me. So my name is Colin, and like Craig said, I am the program coordinator for our chapter, and that basically just means that I'm one of the retired project leads, and I'm able to advise our current project leads on their projects. I'll be talking about our Ethiopia project today, and the community that we're partnered with is in Falaka-Gergera, Ethiopia. It's in the northern part of the region. A quick fact about that region is it's up in the highlands, which means that it has very distinct rainy and dry seasons each year. And those are a big portion of what our projects aim to address. So back in 2017, we initiated the partnership with this community, and some of the biggest needs that we identified were lack of access to water. Unlike the Guatemala program, our lack of access to water, or the community's lack of access, was primarily around irrigation and not drinking water. So this community is separated into 2 distinct people groups. One is the monastery, which is about 300 people, and one is the surrounding community. And the monastery acts as our NGO for the project. In the monastery, they have a very limited means to irrigate a certain field, which is one of the primary fields that they grow teff in. Teff is a grain that they produce in Ethiopia to make injera, which is one of the staple dishes of the community. In the surrounding community, they also have very limited access to water, and that also has to do with getting water from certain springs in the community to surrounding fields. Back in 2018 and 2019, we built, I'm sorry. So yeah, back in 2018 and 2019, we started work on a drip irrigation system for the monastery. That had to do with installing a pump and a pipeline system from the Brocco Spring, which is their primary source of water, up to that field that I mentioned. The upper left picture is me and a team of local engineers and community members putting together that pipeline. And the upper right picture is the reservoir that we helped repair to hold the water and then be the source of pressure for the drip irrigation system. The bottom two pictures show prototypes of our solar and Jura cooker. So one of the other needs that we identified was deforestation in the region, which has to do with the large amounts of wood that they have to use to cook in Jura. They cook it over a fire, and because they cook so much in Jura, that causes a lack of access to wood, and they're hoping that with the solar and Jura cooker, they are able to cook it with solar energy and use less wood. Finally, we're working on a water catchment system, which will help bring water from some of the springs in the surrounding community to their fields. So we are going to implement and go on a third implementation trip this past May, but unfortunately COVID stopped that from happening. And so in that trip, what we were planning on doing was installing a third solar and Jura cooker, which would improve upon the first two designs and use a lot of the lessons that we learned from those two to hopefully be very successful. We are also going to install a pipe bridge. And so in the surrounding community, there was the third spring that they're trying to get water to the community from, but were unable to do so effectively. And they had identified a need for a pipe bridge, and so we had been working on that. And finally, we're going to finalize the installation of the solar pump, which the solar panels had been installed, but the actual pump hadn't yet been installed, and then going in and putting in the drip irrigation equipment. Unfortunately, COVID was a thing, and that trip wasn't able to happen. And so, like the Guatemala project, we went into an extensive contingency planning phase where the first backup plan was traveling here in the next few weeks, which due to travel bans can't happen. The next plan was then to go this upcoming May in person, but it's looking like that's not going to happen. So the most likely scenario at this point is doing a remote implementation trip where we do each of the things that I just mentioned, but hire contractors to do so. So that is quite the extensive process, and work has already begun on planning for that. So in addition to our international project, we're also partnered with a local group called the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance in St. Paul, Minnesota. This group is a network of community gardens in the Rondo and Frogtown neighborhoods of St. Paul, primarily aiming to just be a resource in the community for people that need them. Their mission is to build wealth through health, and so they work a lot in promoting racial justice and educating people about different environmental things through their gardens. And our project is in the Peace Sanctuary Garden, where our primary goals are to increase the handicap accessibility to the garden by putting in permeable pavers to make it wheelchair accessible, extending their crop growing season and capacity by putting in a greenhouse, and finally engaging youth and promoting STEM education by putting in solar panels and a rainwater catchment system, and then focusing on the education components and making sure that we provide ways for them to teach kids how each of those things works. And with that, I'll pass it off to Jacob to give a quick wrap up and move forward.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so the last project that I will briefly mention is our Rebuild project. As I mentioned, this is a brand new project team independent of the Guatemala or Ethiopia programs. And so the current project that we're working on is with Beacon Interfaith, which is a nonprofit, yes, a nonprofit that is providing low-income housing for people in need in primarily St. Paul, but also in the Minneapolis. They do have a couple properties in Minneapolis, and so they've come to us with the goal of increasing their the energy efficiency of their buildings by performing energy audits on each building. And so we're partnering with Enerchange, who we had a relationship with from our Lincoln International High School project, to perform those energy audits. And then we will get to see where it goes from there, whether or not there are projects that we can take on to actually address some of the issues we find or not. And so that's a really exciting development. And that project team is simultaneously looking for additional partnerships in specifically the Lake Street neighborhood. We've been exploring a couple potential businesses that we could partner with there, and then as well just throughout the Minneapolis and St. Paul area, any community-based organizations that are working to provide services for our community. And then lastly, because many people wonder about our finances and how much we're spending on a year-to-year basis, I just wanted to briefly go over our project budgets. And so without travel, it looks like we will be spending about $61,000 this year. That's our projected costs. And you can kind of see a breakdown of where those funds are going. And then if we are able to travel, we'll be spending $73,000. And so that's a rough estimate of what we spend. This year is a little bit more expensive of a year because we're actually wrapping in last year's expenses as well, to just a 2-year running total because of everything that COVID has changed about this year and this summer, and not being able to travel. A lot of those expenses that we would have normally been spending, we've had to spend on remote assessment, and that's bled into this year. So we just decided we'll make it simple and we'll do a 2-year running total until COVID and these projects are wrapped up. And so, yeah, at this point, this is a little bit about where our funding comes from. That donor funding represents both private, like corporations, and then also just, private donors, people that appreciate what we do and donate to us. And so then we apply for a lot of grants. We actually have a fundraising team that's working completely independently of the projects to apply for and hopefully get grants that will help fund our projects. And then we also get some funding from both the university and our parent organizations. So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions. Otherwise, I can turn it back over to Craig.
I don't see any questions right now in the chat. Does anyone have any questions here? Or feel free to, add questions to the chat, and we can have them answered, as we're getting into the next talk, or we'll get it to you guys after the meeting. So, all right, let me.
Okay, thank you for having us. And yeah, like Craig said, we'd be happy to answer any questions throughout this next window of time, or after the meeting. But thanks for having us today.
All right.